The head of one of Canada's largest airlines is in Ottawa to meet with federal officials. It's been more than a month since Prime Minister Mark Carney won a minority government in the federal election, and the WestJet CEO is laying out his recommendations for change, some of which include a freeze on excessive fees and airport rents, a review of global best practices, and reform of the air passenger protection regulation system. Alexis van Honsbra is the CEO of WestJet, and he joins me now. It's good to see you again, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's a new government, and you have a message for them that you want air travel not treated like a luxury, but as essential infrastructure. So what does that mean in terms of what you'd like to see, in terms of policy changes from Mark Carney and his team?
Yeah, you know, when you look at Canada, it's such a vast geography, and for thousands of communities, air travel is the only connection to the only realistic connection to the outside world. Nevertheless, when the government looks at infrastructure, they pay for roads and for rails and for ferries and for bridges. But when it comes to air infrastructure, it's being seen as a business. So the government actually makes a profit on air infrastructure, and guess who's paying for it? It's you through the ticket price, because every ticket gets a number of line items that are being added as pass-through cost to you as the passenger, and that's actually sky high in Canada. And I think a country that needs air travel and that is concerned about affordability, it's important to have these fees low, and as low as they are in other countries, and they are not. And so therefore we think there's a significant improvement opportunity that the government could tackle and should tackle.
Other countries, though, don't have the geographic challenges. This is the second largest country on Earth next to Russia in terms of landmass, but with the lack of population density and spread out in the northern and remote areas. So, I mean, how can a country like Canada get costs to that sort of level, given the extra challenges that are just structural here?
Well, the majority of the cost does not scale with the size of the country. So an airport has a 3-mile runway, whether it's in a small or in a big country. Security control is the exact same, whether it's a small or in a big country. And that's the majority of the cost that is happening. And we see, so as an example, for a round trip within Canada, you can easily pay $130 just in fees and charges and taxes that are added by the government or government-controlled entities. The same equivalent in the US would be below $50. So it's about 2 to 3 times more in Canada than it is in the US, or also in other regions like Europe. That's the reason why it's often cheaper to fly north-south than east-west. And it's completely self-inflicted, and we think there's a huge opportunity to make air travel more affordable and allow more Canadians to fly, which in a country of this geography would actually be a very, very important thing to achieve.
Okay, so that gap is $80 or $90 in round figures on a round trip ticket, Canada compared to the United States. What is the reason for that in your view? Is it just that the airport authorities and governments here just set a higher rate? I know we have higher levels of taxation than they do in the United States, but we also have a different suite of programs and offerings than they do in the US. Why the gap in your view?
Well, the first thing is that a lot of money is being paid from the air infrastructure into the federal coffers. So airports have to pay an airport rent. There's hundreds of millions each year that are being paid on that matter. The taxes. Some of the services are simply not as efficient as they could be. So this all adds up, and it would be a major benefit for the country if this would be less. So we estimate that if the fares, if these fees and charges would be half of what they are today, which would be more in line with other countries, this would stimulate another 20 million passengers in Canada. Or the other way around, there are 20 million trips that people cannot afford today because these fees are so high.
But would you pass that on dollar for dollar in fee reductions, or would the lower cost just mean more profit for WestJet and your shareholders?
Now, of course, we would pass it on. And why would we? So most people think airlines make more money if they charge higher fares. Do you know what the most profitable airline is in Europe? It's Ryanair. It's the airline that offers the cheapest fares.
Sheer volume.
And why does it work? You have, as a business, you're much better off making a small profit on a huge volume than making a large profit on a few. And that's where we should go. And you know, over the last 30 years, airfares, so that part of the ticket price that goes to the airline, went down by 50%, inflation adjusted, compared to what it was 30 years ago. Massive saving. Unfortunately, in the same time period, government-controlled fees and charges went up by 65%, eating away the majority of these savings that should be in the pockets of Canadians. And that's wrong.
But a part of it, I guess, there is the principle of user pay, right? That if you use the security, you use the airport, you bear the cost of that. If they are to reduce that cost, unless your argument is, and you have the data, that the government is just sheer profit on this, essentially asking the taxpayers to bear that burden so that air travelers can have a lower cost. Isn't that how essentially it will go?
Absolutely not, because it would entirely pay for itself. If these fees would be lower, there would be 20 million additional passengers in Canada. The tax revenue, the economic benefit that comes from 20 million Canadians being able to afford a trip that they can't afford today would by far outpay any investment that the government would take into this today. It would entirely pay for itself.
Okay, so this is your pitch to the government. I know you've made similar arguments with the previous government under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I mean, what's the reception been under Prime Minister Mark Carney?
So the new government is obviously very new, and this is my first trip to Ottawa since the new government came into place. And what I've been proposing to the people I spoke to was Canada should develop a vision of how air travel should be, and it should be the government to develop this vision. Other countries have done the same. Australia just did a white paper on aviation, sort of how a future modern aviation system that's affordable and accessible and reliable should look like, and Canada should do the same. Look around the world what works well and what doesn't, and pick from the best and develop a vision that works. And we would love to give some input, as other people and other groups will also give input. The government should develop a vision and then work towards implementing the vision. I've worked in Europe. I've seen other parts of the world, and no one gets everything right, but many get things much righter than Canada does. And in a country that needs air travel to the extent that it's required in a country like Canada, I live in Calgary. You get to Calgary by plane or you don't. I mean, you can horse ride there, but it's a long trip. So therefore, there's a massive benefit for Canadians that can be developed, and therefore that's what we're advocating for. And we're hearing interest, at least, and the new government has an agenda that they want to unite Canada, that they want to take down internal trade barriers, that they want to improve the economy, and therefore we hope that they will like the idea and work on it.
Just a sort of a final point. What has been the effect of the change in travel behavior by Canadians with the issues with the United States? Flight volumes are way down. People are choosing to go other places, some vacationing in Canada, others going to Mexico or the Caribbean, these sorts of things. How has it affected your operations, your profit margins? Are you feeling it as a company?
Yeah, so we did see that Canadians are angry when all this started at the end of January, and bookings into the US went down. Now, down doesn't mean they went into nowhere. So we see maybe 15-20% less bookings on our flights, which is significant, but it's not a COVID-like reduction. And we also see that some of this actually shows up in other areas. So we saw Canadians canceling their vacation in Florida and in California and moving to Caribbean and Mexico. So those markets went through the roof during the winter season, at least. We see that Canadians now book flights to Paris and to Amsterdam, and we serve them as well. So we put some capacity into these European destinations. So it's not net neutral. So we are taking a hit, but it's not that this is a complete disaster, not at all. So we are holding in, and we are also an industry that's used to curveballs, and we will deal with this one as well. We also assume that it will be over one day. We look through the fog, and we hope that at some point in time there will be some kind of deal, and then I'm sure Canadians will love continuing flying to the US.
Okay. I want to ask you, if I can, about the big aviation news today is the tragedy in India. And I know it's too early to know causes, and I'm not going to, but I wonder what goes through your mind on a day like today, as someone who runs an airline, when you see a tragedy like this?
Yeah, it makes me terribly sad to see what has happened. It's devastating for everyone around the world, and particularly maybe for people who are professionally in this space and work very, very hard every single day to provide a safe journey for our guests, which we fortunately do. Our thoughts are with those that are impacted by this accident, their loved ones, and that's the thing that needs to be cared about at this point in time, and I'm sure that they will do it. Investigations will happen after every accident, and we will wait for the outcome.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Alexis van Hansbroek, the CEO of WestJet. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.